In 1348, London didn't just smell. It was an environment that, much like the Alaskan interior at 40 below, replaced the traditional rules of biology with the brutal laws of physics. If you walked through the Ludgate in the summer of that year, you weren't entering a city, you were entering a mechanical system in a state of total structural collapse. The centerpiece of this failure was the Fleet River. To the modern mind, a river is a feature of nature. In 1348, the Fleet was a fleet ditch, a trade route, a source of drinking water, and an open sewer all functioning within the same square mile. For the 80,000 people packed inside the city walls, the line between civilization and total biological immersion was exactly the thickness of a few rotting wooden planks. We often romanticize history as a series of kings and battles, but survival in the 14th century wasn't about romance and heroics. It was about numbers, systems, and tolerances. It was about the disciplined choreography of trying to stay alive in a world where the most sophisticated medical minds believed the stars were trying to kill you, while the real killer was flowing beneath your floorboards. To understand the anatomy of failure in 1348, you have to look at the density. London had a population density comparable to modern Manhattan, but with zero infrastructure for the removal of waste. This was a flat spin of sanitation. The Fleet River ran just west of the city walls. It didn't just flow, it carried the ledger of loss for the entire district. Slaughterhouses dumped animal blood, hides, and offal directly into the stream. Tanneries contributed a steady flow of chemical runoff. Latrines emptied into it from both banks. By the time the Black Death arrived, the water was so choked with filth that a Carmelite prior and a bishop had already signed formal petitions of complaint, claiming the stench was a physical force. This wasn't an inconvenience. It was a predatory environment. In the Arctic, the cold steals your heat. In the Fleet Ditch, the filth stole your air. King Edward III himself wrote to the mayor of London, warning that the air of the city was poisoned to the point of great danger. The king wasn't being dramatic, he was identifying a catastrophic failure of the urban lubricant. When the environment becomes this hostile, procedure stops being a list and becomes a race. Imagine a man named Thomas. Like the flight engineer Leon Crane, Thomas is a professional in a world of random creators. He isn't a knight or a monk, he is a raker. His job is the procedure for the impossible, cleaning the streets of human waste. Thomas doesn't view the city through the lens of religion or bravery. He views it through stress points. He knows the tolerance of a cesspool plank. He knows that a stone-lined pit must sit exactly 2.5 feet from a neighbor's property to prevent seepage, a technical failure that happened constantly. For Thomas, survival is a ledger of seconds, source 5. He knows that exposure in 1348 doesn't mean freezing, it means miasma, the theory that corrupt air causes disease. While the elite carried bouquets of flowers, posies, to their noses to comfort the brain, Thomas focused on the mechanical truth of waste management. His survival kit was humble but vital. A chamber pot, his primary inventory of resources for daily maintenance. Linen undergarments, the heavy lifting of medieval hygiene designed to absorb the predatory moisture of the city. A lookout below, warning, the legal procedure required before dumping waste into the street. Disciplined choreography of urban life. In October 1348, engine of Europe began to misbehave. It wasn't a subtle inconsistency, it was a catastrophe. The Black Death arrived in London by November, moving faster than news, faster than armies. The most prestigious medical institution in the world, the University of Paris, produced a report. 49 of the finest medical minds concluded that a triple conjunction of Saturn, Jupiter, and Mars in the sign of Aquarius had corrupted the atmosphere. This was the wrong manual. Much like a pilot trying to fix a flat spin with the wrong control inputs, the medieval doctors were prescribing bloodletting and lancing buboes. They suggested that if you were anxious or overweight, you were a dead man walking. But the quiet truth at the center of the story was different. The plague wasn't caused by the stars, It was a biological malfunction called Yersinia pestis. It traveled along trade routes from Central Asia, leaping from the sick to the healthy through the simple logic of contact. In the Alaskan interior, fire is permission to exist. In the Fleet Ditch of 1348, clean water was that permission. London's primary water supply, the Great Conduit, was a genuinely impressive infrastructure project of lead and timber pipes. But the system had a warped seal. There was no separation between the clean water and the output of the cesspools and slaughterhouses. The calculus of survival for a Londoner was brutal. You were often drinking downstream from your own toilet. People didn't drink beer because the water was too dangerous. That is a myth. They drank water because it was a mechanical truth of biology. But in 1348, every sip was a wager made under pressure. When the plague hit, the Great Conduit became a ledger of loss. The water cobs, the men who delivered water for a fee, began to die. The choreography of the crew was breaking down. To understand how quickly routine turns into emergency, we look at Richard the Raker. In 1348, Richard fell through the rotting wooden planks of his own cesspool. He drowned in feet of accumulated waste, not just his own, but his neighbors too. The wow factor of this story isn't the tragedy, it's that nobody treated it as unusual. In the 14th century, drowning in a ditch was a technical hazard of the job, much like a cold weather test flight going wrong. The Fleet Ditch was so choked with filth that it had lost the right to be stable. Survival in this ditch required a long chain of small, correct decisions. Decision 1. Do not store your clothing in a wardrobe, guardrobe, directly over a shaft of excrement, even if you believe the ammonia fumes repel fleas. Decision 2. Avoid the vicarage method, pressing a live chicken's bare rump against a plague sore. Decision 3. Follow the simple logic of the river, but do not drink from it. By 1349, the Arctic of the plague had consumed 60% of the population. 50 million people became footnotes in a story of environmental collapse. The Pope in Avignon was forced to consecrate the entire River Rhone so that bodies could be dumped directly into it because the cemeteries were full to the tolerances. This was the purest form of fear. Fear without an enemy you could see, fear that was just time and physics. People like Agnolo Ditra buried their 5 children with their own hands because no one wept for any death. The isolation of the plague did what isolation always does. It altered the mind's relationship to reality. The echo of the empty streets became its own company. The survival of the 14th century wasn't a heroic victory over the Black Death. It was an endurance of it. When the engine finally restarted, the world was different. Laborers, because so many had died, could suddenly demand higher wages. The statute of laborers failed because the mechanical truth of supply and demand was more powerful than the king's law. Venice pioneered quarantine, a disciplined procedure of 30 to 40 days of isolation. The quiet truth at the center of the Fleet Ditch is the same as the one Leon Crane found in the snow. Survival is not a single act. It is a refusal to let despair become a decision. If you decide you are going to die in the ditch, you do. Thomas the Raker, if he survived, didn't think of himself as a hero. He just did a series of small, correct things under pressure. He kept his linen clean, he stayed away from the corrupted air of the sickbeds, and he kept putting one foot in front of the other through the ledger of rot.